Welcome everyone to the SDSU Extension and NDSU Extension Master Gardener Winter Lunch and Learn Continuing Education Series. I'm Prairie Walkling, SDSU Extension Master Gardener Field Specialist based in Rapid City. And today's presentation is the third in a series of continuing education opportunities that we're offering to our Master Gardener volunteers. And this session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on YouTube, and I can send that link out if anyone needs it. And if you have questions today, you can type those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There's a little question mark, or you can type those in the chat, and we welcome those questions from you. And today we're delighted to welcome Stephen Robertson, the SDSU Extension Pesticide Education Field Specialist based in Brookings. And the topic today is pesticide safety for Master Gardeners. And thank you to those who sent in their questions ahead of time. So Stephen can address some of those. And a little more about Stephen. He's devoted his life to learning and service. He received his doctorate in entomology in 2021 from the University of Arkansas. In his role as SDSU Extension's pesticide educator, Stephen serves the applicators of South Dakota by coordinating, developing, and supplying the required education for certification and recertification in the state. His primary focus is pesticide use safety, which he's particularly passionate about. So welcome, Stephen. And we thank him for being with us, even though he's not feeling 100%. So thank you for being with us today, Stephen.
Thank you, Prairie. Thank you for having me, and I'm really happy to be here. Don't worry about the sickness. This time of year gets me out doing recertification trainings for a lot of applicators, and as you guys know, some of those folks can be quite stubborn when it comes to things, and so even on their deathbed, they'll show up to these events and then share all of their pathogens, and it becomes somewhat of a mop, much like a grade school. So you parents out there, you know exactly what I'm going through. I'll get everything probably every year, and I'll just suffer through it, and then show up and do these educations with a weird voice. So bear with me. I know I have a very nasally voice right now. I sometimes sound like that, but it's not nearly this bad. So yeah, I'm here to cover some things. Thank you so much for the questions. They're really going to help guide the conversation. Something really important I want you guys to know is typically in a format like this, what we try to do is develop a PowerPoint presentation to sort of guide us through some educational points. And it really helps organize things and helps us cover it. Unfortunately, I've been so busy, I haven't had the time to do that. But I thought to myself, what better way actually to learn than to go through the process. So what I'm going to encourage you all to do, if you could follow along, if you have multiple screens, if you have the ability to minimize and go through things, I'll show you how to do things as much as I can. Follow along with me. And this is actually going to help you out quite a lot. And so the first thing I want to do, I want to start off with the organizational structure of pesticide use in the United States, how it works. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the Environmental Protection Agency. This agency was developed in 1970, and it wasn't linked with FIFRA, or the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act, until 1972. And so there's a bit of a delay between when EPA was created and when EPA took over the responsibility of overseeing that legislation. Nonetheless, we're at a point now where the EPA is in charge of everything to do with pesticides, pesticide registrations, pesticide approvals, pesticide toxicity ratings. And the way the EPA goes about this is through several ways. Number one, there are loads of existing pesticides. There are much fewer active ingredients, but we can take an active ingredient and we can do all sorts of things. Think about with cooking or baking. I can take an egg and say the egg's the active ingredient in most baking, right? It's one of the things that holds things together besides wheat gluten. Um, but you take an egg and you can make all different types of bread, depending on how you put those ingredients together, how high you cook it, how long you cook it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing with formulations. I can take one ingredient that can do one specific thing, but I can throw in all different types of stuff to make it aerosol. I can throw it to make it a liquid. I can make it stick to things way better. And so the way that I change my formulation really adds into these products. And I want you to think when we're talking about pesticides, really, but the biggest thing we're talking about, most of what we're talking about are, again, minimal numbers of active ingredients and a huge array of formulation types. And so most manufacturing companies, that's their goal. How do I take an active ingredient that already exists? Because it's very expensive to develop new ones. So how do I take this one and then make it work in a new formulation? And a lot of the EPA's responsibility is to take data that already exists and then use that in order to develop models to kind of give us an idea of how things are going to work, how things are going to persist in the environment. And so they use that in order to develop a toxicity rating. They use that in order to develop for registrations. Are these going to be potentially problematic for endangered species or the habitats that we have the responsibility to protect? And so that is the first line of approval process for any pesticide product. And then each state has their own program, and each state has the ability to approve or deny registration in their state. And it's up to, for us, that's the Department of Ag and Natural Resources. So when it comes to any kind of registrations, any kind of approval for the use of things, and including some special circumstances which do occur, it is the responsibility of the Department of Ag to review the information from the EPA as well as the manufacturers in order to decide what's best for the people of South Dakota. Um, I'll say that the gamut of things is huge. That job is not easy. And it's really important that they follow lines of protocol lines, essentially. How do we go through the approval process? What do we need to look at to know whether or not this is good for South Dakota? My role in all this is somewhat off to the side. So each state also covers the applicators, like what they have to go through. It's called a certification and training plan. What is required of them in order to be certified, and then for the state of South Dakota, licensed to make applications with pesticides. Most of you would probably have a private applicator's license. Some of you might have a commercial applicator's license, and we need to discuss what's going on there. But my role in this, it's like Prairie was saying when I was introduced, biggest thing that I do is I bring together the education, those requirements that you guys need in order to become certified and then licensed. I'm the one that puts that together. I make sure that I try to develop course material that's going to benefit you and actually provide you information that you can act on and participate with, behave with. So that is my primary role. And the reason I say that is to go ahead and upfront address some of those questions that are asking about, say, residuals or products that you're looking for recommendations for specifically treating certain things. I can direct you to those individuals who might be able to offer a recommendation, but I do not myself provide those recommendations. My expertise is like Perry said, I've got my doctorate in entomology. I'm more of an entomological ecologist, meaning I study the ecology of insects, at least I did. And so knowing, and again, remember what I said, as far as the number of active ingredients out there, there's fungicides, rodenticides, herbicides, insecticides. There are thousands. And I don't know that there's ever going to come a point in my career where I know every single one and then be able to offer some sort of recommendations, one against the other. It's also, and this is actually crucial for you all as master gardeners, as volunteers underneath the South Dakota State University Extension System. We do not endorse manufacturers and we do not endorse products. So while you at home might find that, hey, this one product is the absolute best product I can think of for this one pest in this one environment, we cannot say we cannot, because we are an entity that is not tied to those manufacturers, we cannot endorse those. We can't say this is the only product that works. What you can say though is there are active ingredients that work, and you can direct them to make their own decisions. And that's really what our objective is in extension, and for you guys as master gardeners. It's to offer the power for them to make their own choices. And I know that sounds like it's sort of pushing off the bill or pushing off that sort of responsibility on somebody else, but it's not. And so really what we're doing, again, we're empowering people. We're giving them the knowledge and the ability and the know-how in order to make those decisions on their own. And there's no more powerful position to be in than that itself. When they're relying on us entirely, they're just going to keep coming back and not necessarily learn for themselves. And that's really what we want. Again, we want to empower people. Oh, thank you for putting up that link there. All right. So, what I want to start with is, I guess I've already started, and we're well on our way, right? So, what I'm going to do here, I'll share this screen. I think it's this one. Yes. I've got loads of screens. I've got three different screens, and that's why I was saying follow along. So what I want you guys to do, I'll stop sharing this and then I'll get back into the share real quick. I'll give you guys a linear pathway. So follow along with me if you can. If you can't, no big deal. It's going to be recorded. You should be able to follow this later on. We go ahead and share. And what I'm going to do, what I'd like you to do, what you guys are going to be seeing is a full screen of me talking, or you'll see the screen share right now. Minimize that. Really, what we're trying to do is get me into a small box up here in the corner so that you have the full screen to work with. That's what we're looking for here. Now, I'm going to open up the internet here, and again. One of the most important things that we can do for people is to empower them. Um, there are several things that we can do. Number one, how do we identify a commercial applicator that might be able to do applications on our properties that are important? How do we identify product? How do we identify dealers? Where do we get this product from? Can we just go to Walmart and pick up all the stuff? And then the answer to that is no, Walmart's not going to have everything. They'll have some general use stuff, but they're not going to have some of the restricted use chemicals that most of you, or hopefully some of you, are approved to use. And if needed, we can go through the certification and the licensing process in the state of South Dakota for both private and commercial applicators. But I kind of want to give you a background of how to go about finding products that are going to do the thing that you want. First, let's find dealers, okay? So dealers in the state of South Dakota have to have a commercial applicator's license. In the state of South Dakota, the Department of Ag and Natural Resources, they have a database, a searchable database. And so we'll pull up this commercial applicator search. Any dealer has to have a commercial applicator's license. And then what we can do is we can look up license type. You see here, it's got applicator or dealer. And so I'll just look up dealer. And then I want Brookings County because I'm in Brookings County. I don't want to go all the way across the state to buy product. In some cases, you might have to. And I'll also say that there are some approved dealers that are housed online. And so you can purchase some of these products online if you find a cheaper price. Hey, by all means, go with what works for you. But just make sure that those products are registered. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. And so we'll search. And again, this is publicly available. I'm not showing you anything you shouldn't be able to see or shouldn't be able to see yourself. And so I can actually go through and look in the Brookings County area. These are the people that I have access to. And of course, it gives me the name of those individuals, their companies themselves. And I can go through and I can verify, okay, CHS, I could probably look that up. Farmers Ag Center, Limited Liability Company, I could look that up. I could do another internet search, find some contact information in order to reach out to these people and see if they've got the product. In many cases, these dealers are going to have lots of information on the products that they sell. And so they'll be able to give you, excuse me, they'll be able to give you a lot of the background information, what to expect when using it, where to get it from, how to go about using it. You also have access to the manufacturer. So every single label is going to have manufacturer information. You can always contact those people. Manufacturers love to talk about their product, and don't hesitate to use that as a resource. It's really important. This is also a good opportunity or a good way for you guys to check the status of your own licenses. So if you're not sure that you have one or if it's up to date, you just search. What I suggest is just doing one of these search fields. When you start doing multiple, there's a good chance that you're going to hit a mistake and it's going to come back with zero results. This can be a quite a frustrating system to use, um, but as long as you know how to do it, it's not so bad. And so this is how you would find a dealer. Now, how do you find a product? That's pretty tough, right? And so a number of the questions that I've got, and I'll just address the first one here from Ruth Beck over in Pier. She wanted me to talk about the control of windmill grass and established turf. Well, first thing that we can do, we'll go to the Department of Ag. This is the full name of the organization itself. You don't need to type all this in. You could just do Danner, but I just wanted you guys to see it all. So, registration, product registration is what I'm looking for. Oftentimes, keyword searches or knowing how to find things on it's one of the most powerful things you could do as long as you are using Google search and getting to those things. Excellent way to find stuff. And so here we are. First hit here is pesticide product registration. And so here we go. We've got new products that would be registered. And then there are ways that I can search through here. And I like this site, but it's not nearly as powerful or as informative as this next one. So the Department of Ag and Natural Resources has an agreement with Kelly Solutions. So I'll just type in Kelly Solutions. It'll come up. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for Kelly Products, the online pesticide registration here. And so the Department of Ag, like I said, has this relationship with Kelly in such a way that their database is shared online. And so everything that SD approves and the products that are registered, Kelly Products takes and then gives you access to that information. So we'll search by state. You can see their coverage. They've definitely got a lot of people that they work with, and it's a fantastic program because it allows you to we'll just go to pesticide registration search, but you could search by company, product, pest. And so when you ask about windmill grass, let's just go here, enter the name of a pest. Now, I haven't done this, but there may be a different name for windmill grass that's important, and I'll do that in just a second. All right, so here's what we're going to do. This out of the way here. I'm going to find the correct name for windmill grass, chloris. And if I could spell, all right. I sure wished for tumble. So, unfortunately, what this is giving back to me is right now there may be no products that are currently registered to control the common name tumble windmill grass. And so that's really important. One of the things that I want you guys to recognize, and one of the things that is really important for you guys to know as applicators, why that's so big. Here we go. This is the EPA registration site. And so what I'm looking at is just pesticide labels. I want to bring up a pesticide label to give you guys an example of some things that you should be able to do on your own. If you're going to be using pesticides, there is one point of contact, and really it comes down to one job that you need to do. That is to read, understand, and apply those label instructions. That is the only goal that you have as a licensed applicator. Now that isn't as easy as it sounds because a lot of these labels are written in legalese. They're legal documents, they are legally enforceable, and so it has to be written in such a way that is far less interpretable and much more concise and precise about the language that they use. And so I'm just going to go here, and what I'm looking for is the label system. This is another way that we can look for chemicals themselves. What I'll do is just do 2,4-D. I'll search. Sometimes there are no labels for these things, which is a real pain when I do stuff like this because
Stephen, are you able to zoom in a little and make the screen a little bigger?
that is as far as I can go
Like,
with
that's good.
seeing. Okay.
That helps. Yep, thanks.
Okay. All right. So let's go down this after. We'll find one eventually. My goodness. It's worth saying that a lot of these products were previously labeled, and the reason they are no longer labeled probably has something to do with maybe the toxicity. I really would have hoped one of these would be, geez, Pete. I just need one. Oh, hello. Hooray. Yay, we got one. So I'll just go to one, and really what I'm looking for is the labels here. And I just pull this one up. It looks like April 2024. So this is a pretty recent label. It gives you the verification from the EPA, the letter that says, we read your label. It's good to go. You need to make these changes, blah, 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 blah. This is a very concise label, but it is a label nonetheless. All the information that you could possibly want, including zooming in. Take some time here. These are the weeds that this label approves. If the weed that you're looking to control is not listed here, and remember that these are common names, and so some of these things are going to be given in many different ways. It's good to sort of look this up and try to find the different names. So I'll just look up shepherd's purse. Shepherd's purse. It looks like that's the only name that's going to be associated with this, but Capsella bursa pastoris, that's going to be the scientific name. And that might be something that is listed on those labels as well. So recognize the common names are not necessarily exact. Sometimes there's multiple, right? And so we need to make sure that we understand when we're looking to treat a specific type of weed or an insect or whatever, make sure you know those common names and that there are multiple common names. And so when you go into that label, you can actually go through and say, okay, I'm actually looking to treat for red sorrel. So it's on here. I can use this product. But we know that's not enough, right? Because just because something is approved for it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be an effective control method. And so this is the active ingredient here, and you can find that up here. This is going to also include the active ingredients right here. This is a requirement on all labels. They have to have the listed ingredients. The inert ingredients are going to be your formulation stuff. So how do they make it work the way it works? The thing that actually does the killing is going to be atrazine. And in this case, what we can do is we can just look up some research. And I find it best actually to do research searches if you're interested. This is going a little deep into it. But do your research searches on Google Scholar, and it may not come up, but I can look atrazine on red sorrel. And so red sorrel starts to pop up, and then I'm looking at different ways of potentially controlling it. This one here, the impacts of fertilizer hexagon on sheep sorrel. So it's a little bit different, but it's still a sorrel type and it might be related. And so we can go through this research and sort of figure out what sort of dosage information is going to be required to knock that down or to take care of that weed. So for the case of windmill grass, it doesn't look like that it is an identified pest. I'll also say that depending on the size of your operation, how much of an area you're looking to control. In a lot of these cases, there are some general products that you can use. If you can get away with using those general use products, some of those restricted use products are a lot riskier to use. And so I would um, strongly advise you to use those general use products if you can. So like Roundup. Um, Roundup's a good product in the sense that yes, it's get overused. And in most cases, what we're talking about is glyphosate. The formulation for Roundup has changed. There's now four active ingredients. They've removed glyphosate. Glyphosate has caused Bayer to get sued a ridiculous amount of times, and so they decided to pull back. They reformulated Roundup. It should still be as effective, but now we're dumping four different types of chemicals rather than one because of litigation. So unfortunately, Roundup is potentially still a good product, different uses now. And so we got to go back and read those labels. You can't just go out there and spray it. Make sure you read those labels, follow those instructions. And again, if you can use those general use products, far better than the restricted use ones. Henry Liz, gotcha. Thanks, Barb. Um, yeah. And I think it's really important for everybody to kind of understand. Let's see if this one's any different. I don't think it's going to be. No. So what I'd really like to do, let's go to find a label that's going to be a little bit larger. Perfect. I kind of want to break down the parts of a label so you guys can navigate it a little bit easier. And this is going to be the same across the board. So the EPA has set regulations on where things have to be, and then they give you a list of information that a label has to have. That doesn't necessarily have to be in any one specific location. But it's really important as you guys are selecting these products for you to go through, number one, see, is it going to be a product that I want to use? Is it going to control these pest species that I'm looking for? That'll be on the label. Is it something that is useful for the area that I'm in? That'll be on the label. Is this something that I can afford, and is it going to be effective? Some of that's going to be on the label, but as you guys know, whenever it comes to manufacturers, they want to sell that product. And so if you ask them, hey, would it work for this? And if it's on the label, they'll say, oh, yeah, 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 definitely. But it may not. There are things called resistance. There's, of course, compliance issues. If you're not doing it exactly correct, it may not have the results. So really important to go through the label, make sure that you can do everything that is required listed on that label. Um, and so here again, active ingredients, that's one of the first things. This is a restricted use pesticide. This is a restricted use statement. It tells you what you're able to do. And some of these, there you go, for retail use to those to and to be used only by certified applicators or person under their direct supervision. I want to make an amendment to that. In South Dakota, supervisory applications are not allowed. If you are to use a restricted use product, you have to be licensed either as a private applicator or a commercial applicator. Another important thing here is the group. This is really important for resistance management. If you use a group identifies the mode of action or the MOA. That mode of action gives you an idea of how the product actually works. Is it going in and disrupting some cellular process? Does it prevent water from being absorbed by the roots? Does it attack the central nervous system of insects? That is sort of hinted at in those groups, and you can look up what those groups mean. In this case, we've got a group 5 herbicide. If you were to continually treat with the group 5 herbicide over and over and over again, biology and animals have this really unique way of adjusting to the pressures that we put on them. And so one out of a billion insects might have a slight resistance to group 5 herbicides or atrazine specifically. And so if that thing reproduces, all of its resistance is passed on to the next generation. And imagine this, if I get out there with atrazine and I kill everything but the ones that are resistant, that next generation is going to be much more resistant. And as things go on, that selective pressure is just going to continue to select those individuals that are highly resistant. So whenever you're going through a very good protocol for treating pests is going to be monitoring this group or the active ingredients so you're not reusing the same stuff over and over. We'll just keep going. This is a really good one here. First aid. It's almost always in the first and second page that for toxicity levels 1, 2, 3, 4, there is a requirement on where it has to be. It has to be on the front paneling, so either first or second page. And this is really important. When you guys get out and you're using this stuff, most of the stuff you're probably going to be using are not going to be so bad that if it touches you or it gets on you, you're going to immediately fall out into the field. But this is good to have on you. If you were to get poisoned by some of these things, make sure you take that with you to the hospital. Make sure you have it on you in the field. If something were to happen, say you just happen to have low blood pressure and passed out, and now you're laying in a pool of who knows what. First responder wants to know what they're dealing with and how to appropriately address it. And so you can look at these first aid statements and you need to recognize that you need to be able to meet these first aid. If you cannot, then this is not the product for you. Um, Keep going. Precautionary statements. This is a really important one as well. Everything on the label is really important. I'm going to keep saying that. But hazards to human and domestic animals. And so your precautionary statements are really going to cover those things that are threats to either people around you, the environment around you, or maybe animals or plant species that are around you. And importantly, it covers personal protective equipment. PPE is the first line and most important line of defense. First line of defense is reading the label and making sure that you can comply. Second line of defense is going to be your PPE, and it is the most important. So make sure you look through this PPE. In this case, I need protective eyewear. If you don't have protective goggles, you cannot use this product. Don't buy it. Long sleeve, long pants, we could do that. That's pretty easy. This one gives you very specific types of gloves that you would need to wear in order to use this. Barrier laminate is a very, very dense chemical that doesn't allow a heck of a lot of things through. So it's very resistant and just downright, it's a wall between you and anything that might hurt you. Nitrile rubber is a pretty basic one, neoprene rubber and Viton. These are basic instructions on what gloves are going to be compatible with the product. Make sure you pay close attention to that. Make sure you have those products if you're going to be using it. Shoes plus socks. Hopefully nobody here is walking around barefoot when you're making any application at all. And I'll say this as a general rule. The goal of using pesticides is to only ever have it touch the thing that you're trying to control. You never, ever, ever, even if it's something over the counter, just round up that basic old stuff. Some of these things you might be able to get away with drinking and it's never going to cause any problems. It doesn't matter. You never let this stuff touch your skin. Ever, ever. I'm going to let that sit home. Never let this stuff touch your skin. If you set that as a goal, you're going to be already a step above what other people do. Make sure that you are doing everything you can to prevent this stuff from getting into places that it shouldn't be. Um, Basic user safety recommendations. A lot of that's going to be how to take off your clothes, how to launder clothing, how to remove pesticide contaminated clothing, and how to wash your body afterwards. Make sure you're paying attention to those instructions.
Can we
Environmental
zoom?
hazard. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so excuse me. Can we zoom in a little bit?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
And this is some of these things are going to be pretty general. This is across the board. If I never wanted to touch my skin, well, you want to make sure you take off your gloves if you're wearing gloves, right? If you've got things on your body that might contaminate or you might transfer it to somewhere else, it's really important to follow these instructions. And there are heat mats that are available. Where are things absorbed? Your forehead absorbs about 60%. And so when you just like brush that sweat off your head and you've got pesticide on gloves on your hand and you just took your gloved hand, guess what you did? You transfer that pesticide to your forehead. If you were to use the restroom while you're still wearing your gloves, your groin and your genitals absorb at 100% rate. Maybe one of the most important parts of your body to protect. Make sure you are not transferring this chemical to any part of your skin. Be cognizant about that, where that chemical is, and how to avoid getting it on you. Keep going through this label a little bit. Environmental hazards. Make sure this is an incredibly important thing, and I'm sure everybody here recognizes that one of the problems with using pesticides is that it doesn't always just stay where we want it. It's really important to recognize that drift is an issue. For most of your applications, I imagine they're going to be pretty narrow, and so the risk of drift and the risk of it causing problems is going to be pretty low. But make sure you understand that These products are labeled to kill and attack very specific things. Off target, off label could potentially get you in trouble. And these, again, these are legally enforceable, and it is your responsibility to maintain and make sure that these things don't get, as long as you follow the label, you're going to be okay. And if you're not okay, it's the fault of the manufacturer. And I can tell you, they do a lot of effort to make sure that they can blame you no matter what the case is. So protect yourself as much as you can. If you guys are anywhere near water, that includes groundwater, some of these things have high solubility. And so as soon as you put them onto the ground, if it rains, it's gone. It's straight through the soil, right down into our groundwater, into our water table, and then it's going to eventually make it into our streams, probably the Missouri eventually. You can go to just about any stream in the state of South Dakota, and if you were to take a chemical profile, you're almost guaranteed to find a very high level, probably, of certain chemicals. 2,4-D and glyphosate are one of the most strongly and highly used chemicals around the world. We can find them in every body of water pretty much throughout the US. It's really important that we protect these systems. And so understanding how things move throughout the environment, if you see a groundwater advisory here, look, it says right here, atrazine can travel, seep or leach through soil and into groundwater, which may be used as drinking water. And so if you've got a well nearby, maybe atrazine's not for you. You don't want to put atrazines down. That's going to get down into your well. And then as you pull that water up to give to your family and yourself, you're drinking atrazine. Again, make sure you know exactly where things are going. And the goal is never let this stuff touch you. That's inside or outside. And so make sure you understand that, and each chemical is going to be different. Some chemical and some formulations, they're just going to sit there. You don't even need to worry about the groundwater advisory. You don't need to worry about the tree line that's just across the hill. But in a lot of these cases, you do. So make sure you're going through and you're reading things very carefully. Mixing and loading, we're not going to talk about this. This is primarily atrazine's a very heavily used chemical in ag production. And so this is likely for mixing for major things. We won't go into mixing, but it is an important thing to do. And this would give you specific orders of operation. So when you mix things, how you should mix things. Again, we're not going to spend too much time on that. But if you do intend to mix, make sure you lead that thoroughly and make sure you're able to comply with it. Won't get into that. Physical or chemical hazards. A lot of this is going to talk about what it might react with in the environment. And some things will have interaction with the environment. If you guys use, say, Fostox tablets, if you were to get water on a Fostox tablet, it is a fumigant that you toss into prairie dog holes that releases a gas that can kill. It's also used in grain fumigations. In any case, if you were to get it wet, highly flammable. As soon as water hits it, it's so reactive, it'll burst into flames. So make sure you understand there are physical and chemical hazards as well. Directions for use. This is the next section. And now this one may be among the most important. I told you guys I would say that again. So your directions for use, it actually lays out everything that you need to do in order to use that product appropriately. And the only way that the product is going to work for you is if you use it in the way the manufacturer suggests or recommends. And again, this is a legal obligation. You have to do it. So you would go down and look through the directions for use. It does have restrictions, and it'll tell you not for use for states Hawaii or Alaska. I will say that there are some products that South Dakota has not approved and are not allowed in South Dakota, but it's pretty minimal. You really have to go to California in order to see some of those major restrictions. But make sure that you are recognizing that there are restrictions on when you can use it. If you have CRPs, it looks like you can use it in CRP, conifers, Christmas tree plantings, etc.
Stephen, um,
Yes.
I was just going to tell you that I don't know if I told you this, but we also have NDSU Master Gardeners with us.
Oh
So
yes, that's right. Yes, and
yeah,
North Dakota and South Dakota have very similar sort of mantra when it comes to pesticide usage. We are different entities. We are different organizations for you guys in North Dakota. You guys would be working with NDSU is also the state lead agency, and so they cover the product registrations as well, I believe. And I think it's a concerted effort. Every state has a different structure of how pesticides are regulated and controlled. If you're interested in reaching out to anybody in North Dakota, get in touch. I know some people up there that will help you, particularly the lead up there, Madeline Smith. She's excellent, but reach out. In a more recent effort, the EPA the EPA's been sued a bunch of times, and this is important because when the EPA gets sued and they have to pay a bunch of money for not doing their job, that's our tax money. All that tax money that you pay for when they have $1 million settlements or larger, hundreds of $1 million settlements, that comes out of tax dollars. That's money that could have gone to improving our road systems, to improving our piping systems, to cleaning up our waterways. These are things that it could have gone everywhere else, but because the EPA didn't do their job or for whatever reason it was decided that they went too far, they get sued for it. So it is very important to follow the rules and regulations of the EPA. And in this case, endangered species, really, 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 really important. Okay, so one of your goals as a steward, as a licensed applicator, is to protect all off target. Endangered species are incredibly important when we're looking at the resilience and the health, overall health of an environment. In general, the more species, the better. Think about this: if disease came through and knocked out a single species, and you have 200. Maybe that's not such a bad deal. Your environment, your system is pretty healthy. It's pretty robust to that sort of knockdown. Now, if you have 5 species in an environment, like some of the monocultures that we see in agriculture, and then a disease comes through and wipes out an entire species that was integral to the functionality of that environment, endangered species or not, that's going to be a very hurt system. So make sure it's important to protect every single species. I know with a lot of the guys that I work with, there's a lot of sort of pushback. It's just a butterfly. Well, that butterfly is important, and protecting it is equally important. Get into agricultural use requirements for those things that are allowed for use in agriculture. There has to be a separate section for it, and there's good reason for it. Imagine the effect size of ag in South Dakota. If you guys live on the east side of the state, you can drive that I-29 corridor, and more than 90% of that corridor is ag. Soy, corn, probably some livestock you'll see on the side of the road. And so what we're talking about is a huge amount of land that could be potentially exposed to chemical. So we have to have a specific section for agricultural use. If you guys, if that applies to you, make sure you read it. If it doesn't, we can go down to non-agricultural uses and we can look at product to be used, agricultural plants, farms, nurseries, or greenhouses. Make sure if you guys are doing things in greenhouses, make sure that it is approved for use in greenhouses. That is an enclosed space. And so if it is not approved for use in those spaces, you could potentially be doing something that is very off-label and potentially threatening your own life, as well as the sensitive plants that you're using in there. Again, it's an enclosed space. And so if you use a specific, say, herbicide in order to knock out something that happened to move in, you might be getting something into the atmosphere that's going to kill all those sensitive plants. Tomatoes are an excellent example. They, from a mile away, if they even think about glyphosate, they're going to die. So very, very, very sensitive. We can go down a little bit further. We're not going to do much on resistance here, but what I want to do is I want to get down to application procedures. Um, and so make sure that you have the equipment that it's talking about here. Make sure that you can maintain 35 to 40 PSI at nozzles. So if you have a backpack sprayer, make sure that you're able to maintain that pressure using your pump spray. Make sure you have that sort of control, that sensitivity in your system. If you don't have the right equipment, again, this is not the product for you. And so there's really important to remember that when you're thinking about using a product to control something, before you buy it, you read the label. Before you bring it home, you read the label because you want to know where to store it. Before you use it, you read the label. Before you try to throw it away, you read the label. In every single case, there's going to be specific instructions on how to deal with this. We'll keep going down. Managing drift, this is really important. Keep going. These are going to be the things that it's approved to control. And you can see this is more of a broadleaf control. Atrazine is really good for broadleaves. I'm sure some of you guys have kochia, for example. I think kochia has already shown resistances to, if you guys have any kochia, has already started showing resistance to atrazine. And so that's another important thing to remember. Just because a product is labeled for something doesn't mean that it's going to be effective. And so it's really important to reach out to your extension agents. For those of you guys that are looking for weed management, there are a couple people. I should give you that information. In fact, I will right now. If you are looking for weed control management, Dr. Jones is our he's a row crop weed specialist, but he'll be able to give you at least some advice. This is Greg Reeks. He's our new weed ecology field specialist. This is really the guy that you would want to go to for some of your at home and garden stuff. He'll be able to at least give you some way of being able to tackle some of these problems. Get this out of here. What I want to get to is all the way down at the bottom. What I'm looking for is storage and disposal. Usually it's one of the last things that are going to be on here. Remember, this is going to be really important. In some cases, you can't store in the cold. And so I've seen bottles of Roundup that sat out and froze. That product's no longer useful. As a general rule, things can sit on your shelf for about 2 years, as long as they're stored in the 3 years, as long as they're stored in the conditions that are specifically stated in the label. If you can't Again, if you don't have the facilities to be able to store this in the specific storage and disposal, don't do it. Don't buy it. Disposal is also really important. You can't just take, and this includes over-the-counter products as well. You've got to go through and read those. So that Roundup that you bought at Walmart, a lot of times you can't just toss that into the trash. What that ends up doing is it takes a little bit of product, it's just a small amount, but it takes that little bit of product and then contaminates an entire landfill. The goal of that landfill is to have a wide variety of flora fauna that help break things down. And so eventually that landfill turns back into something that is potentially usable or attractive, which is what we see at the South Dakota Nature Park here in Brookings. That was a previous landfill that's now been open to the public and is a pretty attractive place. Those hills out there, guys, buried with trash. Um, and so make sure that you understand that there are proper ways to clean things and get through it in order to appropriately address it. So that is your label lesson. So we know how to one identify what are we talking about killing. Then we can go on to Kelly products. We can search for a product. We can locate that product on EPA. We go to the EPA, we look at the labels. Before we even buy it, we could go to the EPA, search a label, make sure you're searching by those criteria that I showed you could. And then pull up that label, read through it, make sure you can perform exactly what's being stated. Perfect. I know it's a lot, and it's going to be the learning curve on this is incredibly high. That said, make sure you know how to do it. It's going to make you a much stronger pest manager. All right, now I want to, because it looks like I'm running out of time here. I have a tendency to talk too much. I'm going to go through, there were a couple questions that I did want to address. Again, if you have specific questions on recommendations, reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to direct you to the right place. That said, I do not make those recommendations myself. For example, like what do I use to control apple maggots? Well, I don't have apple maggots, and so I don't control them. But there are products that are available that can help you control those things. Let's see. The least risk factor for drift contamination of nearby plants. There is not a single chemical out there that is not that does not have a risk factor associated with drift. The least risk factor, that's not going to be necessarily on the chemical so much. It'll be on the formulation. It also comes down to your applications. And so if you guys are using, for example, small droplets, very, very small droplets, imagine taking a spray bottle. If you have that really tight on there and the pressure's really high and you blow a mist cloud, that mist cloud sits in the air, it takes a while to float down. That gives it plenty of time if a wind were to come through to blow it off site. If you use a much larger drop, say like a stream, like a super soaker, or just that fully loose, full stream, it goes in a straight line and then falls. This is exactly what we're talking about. And so there are things that we can adjust in the way that we make applications in order to reduce that drift. Don't think about it as a product by product basis. Think about it more of what can you do in order to reduce that risk to its lowest level. Um, and yes, there are products that are much more prone to drift. Dicamba, for example, you just can't keep that stuff on the ground. That said, you can do things as long as you follow that label instruction. You'll be protecting yourself from any backlash against you, and you'll be reducing your risk of doing that by quite a lot. Let's see, thrips, spittle limit spraying. Let's keep. Yeah, most of these, it looks like you guys are hoping for recommendations.
Specifics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you guys find those chemical products that you're looking for. But there was something that I really wanted to address specifically. Um, it's like I was talking about in the beginning. One of the things that I've heard as a concern from master gardeners is sort of this idea of like, oh, well, I don't use pesticide and you should try this insecticide also. As a volunteer of the university system, and that goes for SDSU, that goes for NDSU as well. Your role in this is not to make those recommendations. Again, it's to empower other individuals with the knowledge that you have in order to make them more successful. We don't do it for them. I don't show up and say, oh, if you just use some neem oil, that's going to take care of it. That may not be the case. And so you could potentially be putting out information out there that is um, does not align with the university message. And remember, as a volunteer of the university system, our opinions, our desires, our hopes, me personally, I don't use a whole heck of a lot of pesticides. Um, but I would never recommend to somebody, especially in a completely different situation, to never use pesticides. See, the reality is this: pesticides are a tool in the tool shed that are absolutely essential in modern society. The way that we've built our society, it just lends itself to having pests. I mean, some pests or some animals like the way that we've built things. And so they come in and we need to be able to take care of them. Earwigs are a problem. Bed bugs. If you ever have bed bugs, you definitely are going to want to use some sort of insecticide. If you have wasps outside, I get this every year, definitely going to want to use something in order to keep that population down. For whatever reason, the European wasps love that overhang. They're an invasive species and they're potentially problematic. And so knocking them back is really important. Don't discredit pesticides and don't direct somebody away from them because of your own personal beliefs. We have to, as parts of the university system, take our own personal beliefs and ideals, put them off to the side. We're here as experts in order to give people the best possible advice that's available, and that includes the use of pesticides. And I'm not going to go any further than this because I feel like really what I'd like to do is just open it up. I had hoped to get done a little earlier, and so that we could totally just have a conversation about things. Does anybody have questions about this? We have about 7 minutes, it looks like. Is that correct, Prairie?
Yes. There was one from Barbara in the chat earlier, and she asked, we can tell the active ingredient, and then should we tell them to Google it?
So the way that if you can remember the process that I gave you, it's really going to be the most powerful route to it. So just give you an example. I can look up indoxacarb and it'll give me some information. But again, active ingredient versus formulation. And so indoxacarb is used in a huge array of different chemical or different formulations. And so you can buy this in multiple different ways. If you just give an active ingredient and just have them go crazy with it, chances are they're going to get frustrated and not find things. And so if you go through the process of letting them know, I know it sounds long and drawn out, but just let them know, hey, go to Kelly Products, search your pests, and then identify those products that are going to work for you, and then keep records. Use experience as well. Reach out to the extension service and say, you know, I don't really know how to take care of that thing, but if you contact Eric Jones, he would be able to help you. Or if you contact Greg over there at SDSU Extension, he'll be able to give you a recommendation. Your goal as a master gardener, again, it's not to make recommendations for things unless you know the research. Really, what your effort here is to sort of, again, give them the power to make that decision themselves, and part of that is going to be directing them to the experts. I know we love to be as helpful as we possibly can to individuals and really give them the answers that they're looking for, but recognize that our knowledge is very limited, right? We don't know everything. I don't know everything. I couldn't possibly give recommendations for a pest that I've never seen before that only exists on the western part of the state. So make sure you focus in on the pathway, not the specific chemicals.
Yeah, I really love the empowerment language that you've been using, Stephen, empowering them to make a choice. And we definitely tell our master gardeners, you're not going to know every plant, every pest. It's just impossible. So we do have the garden hotline as a resource that they can help do some research for us, or we do have those, yeah, extension specialists that you mentioned. Um, and yeah, we have Sydney on from, she is part of the garden hotline. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure, no problem. Something I wanted to mention, and it came up, I think, over the last couple months, was the difference between a private applicator and a commercial applicator, and what would be required for master gardeners to have in order to make certain applications. I'll lay it down as simply as this. If you own property that makes more than $1,000 or has the potential to make more than $1,000 in 1 year, then you are required, if you make any application at all that includes general use or restricted use chemicals, you are required to have a private applicator's license. Now, that gives you broad discretion to use a wide array of chemicals on your own property. You cannot dip into somebody else's property. The one exception to that, you can do it if you have an agreement with them, if they say yes, and of course the use is approved, and they say, well, we'll rather than pay you for it, because anytime you accept a payment, you become a commercial applicator. That said, you can make those applications for the exchange of goods or services. Like if they did something for you, you could go over there and share your product with them and help take care of a pest problem. Um, yes, Christine Lang is somebody else I'd like you to know as well. You guys probably, I would think some of you already know her. Christine is excellent. There are several in the specialty crop. Rhoda Burrows would be another example of somebody that you could rely on to get some recommendations for greenhouse and specialty crops. So we have lows. We've got a lot of depth when it comes to expertise. For commercial applicators, that's going to be individuals that are, again, paid, that work for a government agency, are making applications to public lands, and it's much more restrictive. And so the way that works is that you have to be certified and licensed in specific categories. And if you do not have those categories, you cannot make those applications. So, for example, if you were to want to make treatments in a public area like a public park, you would have to have ornamental and turf. You'd have to have approval from the city. Chances are they would either want to pay you. If it's a voluntary job, you really got to work with them in order to make sure that you're allowed to do so. Um, and there's no room for fudging on this. It has to be done appropriately. Again, we're representing the university system. And so if you guys get out there and make a mistake, it reflects on us. It reflects on everybody. So it's really important that we're all doing our job and we're all dotting our I's, crossing our T's.
And I'm not sure about North Dakota, but some of our South Dakota master gardeners do have demonstration gardens that are on public property in parks or arboretums or things like that. So those restrictions apply if you are working in a public setting or a community garden that is located in a park or a church, or it's open to the public. Just want you to keep that in mind, that those situations would require a commercial applicator's license if you are, and those other steps that Stephen mentioned, if you are going to apply any pesticides.
As a general rule for any of this stuff, if you don't know, ask. We're more than happy to help. And again, because you represent the university system along with us, we want you guys to do it right too. We want you to be successful. So just reach out and say, hey, I don't know right now, but I do know somebody that would. Let me reach out to him and then I'll be able to better help you. More than happy to empower you guys to be able to help somebody else.
Certainly. And I did post our policy guide in the chat, and there is some
Excellent.
information in there about our pesticide recommendations, and we may be editing that a little bit to make it a little more clear. But I don't expect our volunteers to have that memorized or know every piece of our policy. So if questions come up, please, or if you're not sure how to interpret what is in the policy, please ask. And if I don't know, I'll reach out further to get those answers for you. And I'm sure the same thing in North Dakota. Do we have any more questions? Or, yeah, and the Kelly products, do you know if that's available in North Dakota?
I think it is actually. I can look it up real quick.
Yeah, we have a comment about the Kelly products. And we, Sydney put in the off-season garden hotline email in there that is available. Thanks, Sydney. And
And yes, North Dakota is on Kelly Solutions. And so you can look up products that are registered by pests, by active ingredient, by many different criteria. You can find those things for North Dakota as well.
And if you want to just get your evaluation done and out of the way, I put that in the chat. It is 5 questions. It's anonymous. We appreciate your feedback. So as we plan these for next year or beyond, if you can fill that out for us, we appreciate it. And yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Stephen, for joining us. And our next session is going to be with Lisa Morotz, and she's here today if she wants to say hello quick. And Lisa is going to be speaking on giving you some public speaking tips. So any preview you want to give, Lisa?
I'm going to be trying to glean from the audience a little bit too about the types of public speaking that they do. I've been a part of a few different Master Gardener presentations. I have some tips from being a Toastmaster for a number of years, just trying to keep it simple, trying to keep it encouraging so that people have that strength to want to go out there and continue to spread the news of the good things that they know about and move forward.
Thanks so much. Yeah. All right. Well, join us next week. We'll be in February. So February 5th. I don't know where January went, but all right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all so much.